So let's dive into the first topic. And this is every year sort of it's a really intriguing conversation. And you look over the years and we've seen, veteran players that maybe don't do a whole lot that go into their senior seasons and have breakout seasons. If you just go back and look at the Brian Kelly era, you had guys like Jonas Gray, who was considered a disappointment, a bust his first 3 years. He was a top 100 running back, hadn't really done a whole lot at Notre Dame, comes out his senior year, and he was awesome his senior year up until the injury against Boston College. He sort of had that. He was in a now or never moment. This is your last chance to go prove yourself and be able to finish your career off on a good note. Or for some players who maybe aren't seniors, hey, look, you're in a position now where you're being given this opportunity to be the guy or a guy. And you've got some young players breathing down your neck. And if you don't step up this offseason or this season and kind of the offseason leading into the fall, then your window may close. And the better you recruit, which is what we've seen at certain positions, the better it's going to be. Asmar Bilal, somebody just mentioned in the chat, is another guy that went from just a big disappointment. I'll say disappointment, just a guy that didn't do a whole lot during his career. We thought he was going to be better than he was, never really fulfilled that potential. We've kind of had these moments. I think Dalen Hayes is another guy that was a good rotation guy, but really his last year had a chance to make an impact and did. And we've seen other guys that had that chance and didn't make that impact. Javon McKinley is one who was a guy that was considered a disappointment most of his career, never did a whole lot, goes into that last year. Hey, this is your last chance to make an impact. And I thought he did. He was their best receiver on a team that went to the college football playoff. So we've seen guys like this over time that have really been key to what they do. And if they don't step up, then you see them get passed up pretty quickly. So I want to begin on offense. And I have three guys in mind on offense that you look at and say, these guys enter sort of make or break seasons for different reasons. And the first two are going to be skill players, and then you're going to have an offensive lineman. And the first guy I want to talk about is Chris Tyree. The reason I put Chris Tyree in this category is he has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining, and I hope that he uses them now that he's a receiver. Before, I thought this is just going to be Chris Tyree's last year. He's going to be a running back. There's no way you bring him back for a 5th year. What's the point? He kind of is what he is as a running back. But now that he's shifted to receiver, I do believe there's merit, if he's willing to do so, to bringing him back for a 5th season. But he enters a situation where you've got some talent behind you in Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores and Caleb Smith, and then you've got some kids signed in the 2024 class. Micah Gilbert's a guy that I think could be a slot player and a really talented player. You've got Aeneas Williams coming into the 24 class as a running back that can do a lot of the things that Chris Tyree can do. And so Chris Tyree enters this period where I don't think he necessarily has to have this giant breakout where he catches 40 passes for 800 yards or anything like that. It'd be nice, right? It would certainly have a big impact. But I think it's an opportunity for Chris Tyree to come out and say, hey, look, I am finally being given a chance to do something. And I would argue that Chris Tyree hasn't really been given an opportunity the last couple of years to be that guy. You had in 2021, he battled injuries, but also Brian Kelly just came out and said he's a guy that we just used to give Kyron Williams a breather. I think that was a missed opportunity. When in the few times he was given opportunities, you saw him make some big plays. In 2022, they went to an offense that didn't really fit Chris's style. They continue to try to use him in those ways. I thought early on, Chris had an impact. You go back and look at the Cal game, the North Carolina game. Chris Tyree had 2 games in the first 4 weeks of the season where he had over 100 yards of total offense. And I think that sort of set the tone for how teams defended him the rest of the year, although the Notre Dame staff never really used him consistently the way they needed to. Then you fast forward to the Clemson game. They throw him 2 quick screens, and he gets 26 yards, bam, easy. And he just could steal yards like that and just never really got that opportunity to go into a season where it's like, okay, hey, you're a guy that we are building around. You're a guy that we're anticipating being an impact player for Notre Dame this season. And he's going to get that opportunity this year. Now, how exactly that's going to look, we're going to find out. And it's going to somewhat tie into the next guy. But, you obviously have Jaden Thomas that plays a lot of slot. He was a starter late in the year at slot last year. I thought did some great work in the slot. I could easily see him being there again this year, but I also think Jaden could play a lot outside. I think early on, you'll see Chris Tyree, if Jaden stays in the slot, I think you'll see Chris Tyree be a bit of a gadget player early on, where he'll have a chance to kind of come in and do some of the things that we saw last year, jet sweeps, get some screens, get some perimeter stuff as he evolves and develops as a receiver. And then eventually, hopefully by the end of the year, you can use him more on more things down the field. That could be the path that he goes to. Or if Chris has a really strong offseason, really enhances his ability to be a quality route runner, and continues to improve his ball skills. Not that he can't catch, but it's just catching the ball down the field 20, 30, 40 yards over the seam, things along those lines, is a whole different animal than what he's done in the past, where he's caught wheel routes and slides and look screens. And I think Chris has good ball skills. If you go back and watch him in high school, I think it was his junior year, they would put him outside and let him go run go routes, and he'd go make plays. You saw in the highlights we showed last week where he caught a pass down the field and outplayed JD Bertrand for the football. So the talent is there. It's just more about a consistency that comes with just experience doing it. So how quickly can he really get comfortable there to where the quarterback say, hey, look, when Chris is running up that seam and he's got a window over the linebackers in front of the safeties, I can put that sucker out there because he's going to be able to go get it and make those plays and not have it bounce off his hands and get picked off by the safety. So that's a big period for Chris, showing that he can do more than just be a screen gimmicky guy. And then does that force Notre Dame to say, hey, look, we've got to get him on the field more. So we're going to have to do some different things. Maybe you do some more 21 personnel type looks where Chris is in the backfield. You move him around. Maybe it's a couple times you get him on jet sweeps. You have Aldrich kind of as the lead blocker, as we saw. If you guys remember back in the 2014 Music City Bowl, that was the play that CJ Prosise had the 50-yard touchdown on him against LSU. He was still a receiver then. He comes in motion. You hand him off a jet sweep, and they had Torian Folson as the lead blocker. He has a great cut on the edge, and that's something that helps spring CJ Prosise for that long run. So Chris Tyree is a unique player because he brings a really dynamic element to the table that we just have seen in spurts and we haven't seen consistently, because I don't believe that the staff has done enough to put him in a lot of those situations where his dynamic speed, where his one-cut ability can make an impact. I believe that Jared Parker is going to do that. Now it's up to Chris to take advantage. If he doesn't really step up and he's just sort of a gimmicky gadget player all year, I don't know if there's as much merit in bringing him back next year. You're going to have the 4 freshmen a year older. Jaden's going to still be on the roster. Deion Colzie is going to be on the roster. You have 3 new freshmen coming in, plus Aeneas Williams. It's one of those things where if he doesn't come out and perform well, you're just going to have to say, hey, it's time to move on. But if he does perform well, not only for him do you look forward to say, Chris, we think coming back next year could really do you some good, could really help you in the NFL, just really prove that you can be this kind of all-around player. But more importantly, it'll really help this 23 football team a ton. So I think this is a now or never period for Chris Tyree. I'm optimistic that he's actually going to have an impact season. I don't know what the volume will be like. That remains to be seen. There's a lot of questions we have about how exactly the offense is going to look. But I think it's a situation where whatever he does, whether it's 25 touches, 35 touches, 50 touches, 60 touches, between catches and handoffs and jet sweeps, that I don't know. But if they use him correctly, I think his yards per touch is going to be something that this offense greatly needs. And Chris could have a big impact on this football team. Now, what kind of ties into this is another player, and that's Deion Colzie. Now, he's a junior, right? So Deion still has eligibility remaining past the season, senior year and all that. But I think Deion enters in a very important period for himself. What I don't mean here is I don't say, well, if Deion Colzie doesn't become the dude and the best receiver, then it's a disappointment. It's time to move on. I'm not saying that at all. I think that could maybe be next season. But what I do think Deion has to do is he has to take a step forward. I've talked to a lot of people around the program, and the one thing that I constantly hear about Deion Colzie is he has all the talent in the world, and when he's on, he's really good. It's just trying to get Deion to understand what it takes to be that guy every day. And I think that's something that Deion must continue to learn. And if that light goes on for him, he could be a difference maker for Notre Dame this year. Like, look, he's 6'5". He's 215 or so pounds. He's a lot faster than people think. There was a play in one of the spring practices we were at where he was just going against Benjamin Morrison in a one-on-one. There was no pump fake. There was no double move. There was nothing. He just stuck that outside post and beat Benjamin Morrison to the post, folks, by like 4 or 5 yards, just flat out. There was about a yard and a half, 2 yard difference out of the break because he beat Benjamin out of the break, but then he just pulled away from him as he won the post. And you're like, wow, that's impressive. But how did that rep end? Deion drops the football. And I think those are the frustrations that you see with Deion is this kid has all the talent in the world. He's an awesome kid. I mean, you look at some of the things he's involved in off the field and the type of student he is, and there's a lot to love about Deion Colzie as a young man, and there's a lot to love about his talent, but he just has not figured out yet how to be that guy consistently. And when you're trying to accomplish the things that Notre Dame is trying to accomplish this season, you need guys to be that. I need to know that you're going to answer the bell week after week after week. That's huge for a coach. If I'm a position coach and I'm going to say, hey, look, I know Jaden Thomas is going to answer the bell every week. The focus is going to be there. The effort's going to be there. If we get him the football, he's going to go try to make a play on it. And you say maybe he doesn't have the raw tools that Deion Colzie has, but I know he's going to answer the bell every day. And I've got Chris Tyree tearing it up in the slot, and I've got Jaden Greathouse coming along. And boy, that could be a really impact 1-2 punch there. And with Deion, it's like, man, on Tuesday, he's an all-star. On Wednesday, he's just not there, just not locked in, not playing well. Thursday, it's up and down. One week he may come out against NC State and light the world on fire, just dominate NC State secondary, which he is more than capable of, and then come out the next week and you're just like, he's struggling to get open against Central Michigan. That's been some of the issue with Deion Colzie. But you still continue to put him out there because those great moments are so good. And so I think this is really now about Deion. And I think that Deion battled through some adversity last season in some areas that I hope helped him really grow. I think he could have been a guy that could have easily just walked away if he wanted to, and he chose to stay in battle. And I'm hopeful that he gained some confidence this spring. My hope is that he takes that confidence building and rises it to another level in the summer. I think that's what everybody around the program is waiting on. It's like, okay, you showed some flashes this spring. Now let's take that sucker to another level. Because if Deion Colzie is consistently the better version of himself, not the best, because nobody brings their A+ game every day, but just where the focus is there, the production is there, the effort is there, he's locked in, he's doing what he needs to do. He's a more talented player, in my opinion, than Miles Boykin. He's got as much production as Miles Boykin did through 3 years, and Deion's done it in 2. So I think Deion Colzie has a chance to have a Miles Boykin type of jump a year early. The question is a lot like Miles. Will the light go on for him? And that was always the question with Miles. And what we hear about Deion now is very similar to what we heard about Miles Boykin in his career. Like, boy, there's times where this kid is our best receiver. And then there's times where you're just like, I can't justify putting him on the field. That's what we heard a lot about Miles. I haven't heard quite the lows from Deion that we would hear from Miles. But when Miles decided, you know what, I'm going to be that dude, he went out that spring. Now, this is going into his senior year where Deion's just going into his junior year. So it took Miles a year longer. You hope that Deion can figure it out a little bit sooner. But we watched that spring before the 2018 season, and we're watching Troy Pride and especially Julian Love just consistently just get dominated by Miles Boykin. And then he went out in the season and had, obviously, especially once Ian Book stepped into lineup, and had a really impactful year. And so Deion can be that kind of player. And if he does, then this offense is going to be very, very dangerous, because now if you've got that boundary guy that's making those kind of plays, you can move Jaden Thomas there as part of rotation. You can put Jaden outside, put him in the slot. And all of a sudden you've got this 6'5", 215-pound, 4'5", long player that can make a lot of plays. But here's the flip side of it. We all know that's what Deion can be, right? The question, however, is will he do it? And if not, how do you handle that as a coaching staff? So if Deion comes out this summer and in fall camp, he's just kind of the same guy. just a talented guy, but just not that guy every day. As a coaching staff, you have to start making decisions about, I just don't know if this is something we can keep waiting on. We've got an Ohio State game to win. We've got a USC, Duke, Louisville, Pitt, NC State, Clemson. We've got some big games to win. We have to go with what we know and what we can trust. And that would, to me, that would mean maybe moving a Jaden Thomas outside of the boundary more. Maybe you say, hey, look, we got to push Braylon James to get ready sooner. Maybe you move Rico Flores over there. Maybe you do more with Tobias there as part of a where you just go right, left as opposed to field boundary and push the tempo a little bit more. So those are areas where I think if you're a coaching staff and he doesn't show up, consistently, you have to start making decisions. And then once that decision is made, it's hard to kind of then for a guy like Deion Colzie to climb back up when you've got a Braylon James you're competing against, a Jaden Greathouse. You've got Cam Williams coming in, Isaiah Canyon coming in, Micah Gilbert coming in. And so there comes a point in time with any coach where you just say, hey, look, I have to move forward. And this player has not given us what he needs to give us. And so we have to move forward, guys we can trust. That's really the scenario where Deion Colzie's entering that period. Now, this is not me saying that the Notre Dame coaches are thinking that. I've never heard that. I just know football, and I know how coaches think, and I know the period that Deion enters into. And I understand that if he does what he needs to do, boy, he'll be an impact player. And when you think about Sam Hartman specifically and why it's so important for this season, so there's the now or never for Deion's career, but there's also sort of the need for it for this football team. You have a quarterback who has thrown more deep passes than in the last 2 years than any quarterback in college football. You have a guy that loves throwing the ball down the field. We saw it all spring. We saw it in the spring game. We saw clips of him and Deion Colzie hooking up for really impressive plays. If Deion becomes that guy every day, I guarantee he's going to become a favorite target for Sam Hartman. He's going to look in the boundary and be like, I've got a one-on-one over there. I am looking the safety off and I'm coming back to the post, or I'm coming back to the go route, or I'm coming back to the deep stop route, because I know that this guy cannot guard Deion one-on-one. And even if he's covering Deion, he can't make that play. And, so we saw Deion just absolutely dominate Benjamin Morrison in a rep in a one-on-one. But then we go out there and watch him against Syracuse, and Tyler Buckner throws him a go route, and he just allows himself to kind of get ridden out of bounds. And you say, which one of those guys are going to step up? If the guy that dominates steps up more consistently, he will have a big year. There's no doubt, because he is exactly the type of player that Sam Hartman loves. And he's exactly the type of player that I think this offense needs and will promote for Jared Parker, is sort of that if they want to throw the ball down the field, look at the Jaden Thomas post route in the spring game. That was Jaden Thomas playing an outside receiver. That was not a slot position. They want to throw the ball outside. They want to throw the ball down the field. And Deion could have a big, big role in that if he can take his game to that next level from a production standpoint, which then is a byproduct of a greater focus. And him, what we said about Deion from day one when they got him was, this is a young man that is so gifted that I don't think he understands the level of work and fire and just force needed to maximize his talent. If that day ever comes where he does understand that and embraces it, Deion can be special. I don't care if he catches 5 balls the next 2 years. I'll always believe the talent was there. It's just time for him to show it. And if he does, this is going to be a really fun year for Notre Dame. Now, one more player on offense I want to talk about, and that's Andrew Kristofic. This is a kid that I really liked a lot coming out of high school, and he's given Notre Dame some quality moments in his career. I thought inserting Andrew Kristofic and then Joe Alt into the starting lineup in 2021 really helped solidify that offensive line. It was never a dominant offensive line the rest of the year, but it was a solid offensive line. It was a unit that you looked at and said, hey, look, they're able to hold their own. They're able to protect the quarterback. They're able to do some different things, and they could go out and win a bunch of games down the stretch. Then you go into the 2022 season, and Andrew doesn't win one of the starting guard jobs, which I didn't necessarily expect him to. I expected Josh Lugg and Jarrett Patterson to win those jobs. But part of that was because in that spring, he got outplayed in a pretty big way by Zeke Correll. Not that they were at the same position, but Zeke had a big spring in 2022 spring. And it was one of those things where it's like, hey, Zeke's got to move to center, and then we're going to move Jared out to guard. If had Andrew had a better spring and Andrew outplayed Zeke in the spring, then you'd have left Jarrett Patterson at center, and then Andrew just steps in starting lineup, and Zeke continues to battle, and he's now stepping into a 2-year starting job now after Jarrett Patterson departing. But he didn't win that job, and so they made the move that they made. And so Andrew enters this season, and he goes into the spring with a chance to kind of solidify himself as the top guard on the roster. I don't believe he did that. He didn't do that in the practices we saw, and we just saw 2 of the 15. I don't think he necessarily did that in the blue gold game. And so now you enter the summer where Andrew's got a chance to be a good football player for Notre Dame and be a starter, but he's also now being challenged by some younger players. You've got obviously Billy Schrouth is a regression from the spring away from no regression from the spring away from being a starter. I think he's pretty much got that locked down as long as there's no regression. And then now you've got Andrew, who I think does head into the summer as the presumptive starter. I do believe that he is a presumptive starter. I think he's earned that. I think he played well enough for that. But I don't think he did what I don't think Andrew did was just lock it down to where, hey, this is me. I got this. Rocco, you've got a chance to be really good. I know Jagasol's coming. I know that Absher's coming. I know that Pendleton's coming along. But hey, I got this, right? This is me. And I don't think he did that. And I think he enters a period now where he needs to do that. I think Andrew needs to do that for a number of reasons, but primarily for himself. I thought Rocco Spindler had a really good finish to the spring. And I think with Rocco, he brings a little bit more of the when he's on his game and he's moving his feet, which was a big problem for him until late in the spring, he can move people. And I think that that's something that Andrew just has never kind of been able to do. He's never been a guy that can just come out and move people. What Andrew is just a do your job kind of guy. And I think what Notre Dame needs from him is to just be a little bit more, even more consistent in doing your job, but also to be a guy that just is a little bit more impactful. Maybe just a little bit better on the second level, just a little bit better in space, just a little bit more movement at the point of attack, and then finish a little bit better. And I think with Andrew, it's not this enormous jump where he's got to go from being where he is now to just this significantly better player. I think for Andrew, it's just one of those things where it's just, dude, I need you to be, you're a 5th-year senior. I need you to be this guy every day. I need you to be a leader, which I don't think is an issue, but I need you to just be a more impactful player. You've got 8-9 starts under your belt now. You've played a lot of football. I really need you to take your game to another level. If he does that, then he'll lock down the right guard spot, hold it down, and Notre Dame's going to be pretty good on the offensive line. If he doesn't, then as a staff, you have to decide, okay, 5th-year senior, he's still that same guy. Do we roll with it? Or do we maybe say we're going to give a guy that's a little bit more impactful, guy that's a little bit more physical, guy that's a little bit more talented, a guy that has more of the highs, and we're going to roll with him either as part of a rotation or just flat out at some point in time saying, hey, we're going to make this move. So I think this is a big moment for Andrew Kristofic. And a big season could do one of two things. Number one is it could say, hey, look, he had a good enough year to where now he can look at taking his talent to the National Football League. Or number two, he justifies being brought back for a 6th year and says, hey, look, Andrew had a great year. Let's get him back for a 6th season. Let's let him, have 2 years as a starter under his belt. And that's going to then put him in position to go be a player in the National Football League. So I think Andrew Kristofic is another guy that is in a bit of a now or never moment for Notre Dame.